Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I'm Ryan, and today we'll be talking about The Year of the Whale. This is by Victor B. Sheffer, and the decorations are by Leonard Everett Fisher. Fisher won a Pulitzer Prize for illustrations. I don't know what they were from, but he won them somewhere. And Victor B. Sheffer was a biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I've worked with them during an oil spill. So that's very cool. He was working for the Fish and Wildlife Service in the 30s. I mean, this book is from 1969. What's cool about it is it's a fictional book, and it's about a whale calf, the little calf, and he basically goes back and forth between what's happening with the calf, the little calf, and stories he has from his time in service, his time around the world, going to Antarctica and traveling in the Pacific and helping different fisheries. There are some really interesting stories in here that aren't necessarily about the whale either, but really the main gist of this book is it follows a little calf. That's the name of the whale, a little calf, and its mother with other sperm whales for a year. It's a fictional story, but it's based off of some real life events. It's just a year in the life of this newborn calf. So not a lot happens in a year for a calf. They take a while to be weaned from their mothers. They don't have teeth. They're still drinking milk within the year. So it's not like this is the entire life of the little calf. The little calf is just hanging out. It goes month by month. I found when I bought this at a store in Easton, Maryland. There was actually a cutout from a newspaper from 1969 about this book by Charles Cook in the Star. And this person wrote 10/16/69. There are a lot of things I enjoyed about this book. I gave 5 stars. There are some inaccuracies, but it wasn't an inaccuracy in 69. It was an inaccuracy because they've done much more scientific research since this book was written, and they've gotten some answers that really when Victor was writing this book, he wouldn't know. The main one being that at this time, they still thought that a male would accompany a group of females as the harem master, the harem bull, and that he would protect them and stay with them. But they've figured out since that's not the case. Generally, the females and young males that are part of the family are together for a while until those young males go off. The females generally stay together, but there's not like a protecting male that stays with them all the time that kind of fights for them as his harem. In this book, it's almost split each month or every other kind of few paragraphs. You have the story of what's going on with the little calf and the mother and other animals around them. And then you'll have these little stories from Victor about his life and things he's seen on whaling ships, during his time teaching, his time in the Fish and Wildlife Service, even he and his friend taking a small boat up the coast of California a week after Pearl Harbor and how everything was blackened. The entire coastline, the lights were off, and they had to blacken their boat too, I guess to avoid submarines or possible attacks. Pretty amazing stuff. We're following this whale around, and things are happening around him. And Victor packs a lot of stuff into this book, but it's not all about the whale. It's what's happening around them based off of ships, different approaches to whaling. It's talking about red tides and pollution, interactions with humans capturing marine mammals to take them to parks, and what that looked like. It's all fictional, but I think informed by current events at that time and facts. And Victor knows what he's talking about. But one story that I read in here, and it made me put the book down and actually go to my computer and look it up, is there's a lighthouse on the Aleutian Chain in Alaska. It was called the Scotch Cap Light. And I want to call my best friend about this and ask him about it because he may know where it is. On April 1st, 1946, there was an undersea earthquake. And it was felt in the Pacific, and there were tidal waves that stretched all the way down to Chile in South America and to Kamchatka, I believe, in Japan. One of the places that also experienced this tidal wave was up 200 feet or 150 feet or something from the water, and it's this light, like a lighthouse, that's manned by members of the U.S. Coast Guard. And there were 5 members of the Coast Guard in this light, and apparently, this is what they figured out later, it looks like the earthquake caused a landslide, an underwater landslide, which formed this 150 foot or 300 foot, I should go back and look, a huge tidal wave, and it hit the lighthouse and destroyed it. Ripped everything from the lighthouse except for the foundation, just like blocks in the ground. Killed all 5 Coast Guardsmen. They found pieces of them, pieces of a foot, intestines, parts of their bodies later. So it must have been a very violent thing, because there was a building that was further up, about another 150 feet from lighthouse. And people from that building there in the Coast Guard went down to look for their shipmates and couldn't find them, and then eventually found parts of their bodies. But I didn't know that story. And I'm filming this on April 7th. We just had April 1st. It was just the 76th anniversary of this event, and I wasn't aware of it. So there are little stories like that, because he was talking about different things that were happening in the Aleutian chains with the whales as they were visiting, especially some of the sperm whales that were heading further north than the little calf that we were following. This book is also interesting because I've talked about some other whaling books or whale-based books that I read. Moby Dick was from 1851. And the kind of whaling they were doing in 1851 was they were throwing a harpoon, and they were throwing multiple harpoons and then linking their boat, their small whaling boat, to the whale, and basically waiting for it to tire, and then using lances to try to stab it in internal organs so it would bleed out internally. The other book that I read, really the book kind of that kicked off my interest in whales, was Sounding by Hank Searles. And that was from 1981 or 82. That book is really written after whaling ends for most of the world, although there was still illegal whaling from Japan, Norway, and the Soviet Union. Really, that book looks at it is from the point of view of the end of whaling and whales kind of rebounding or reacting to the fact that they're not being hunted. This book, written in 1969, is this in-between period where it's no longer the old whaling that we generally think of when we're thinking of whaling, kind of like from Nantucket, New Bedford, throwing harpoons. Now we're dealing with factory ships and hunters that have explosive tipped harpoons on the front of the ship. And when these harpoons hit the whale, it kills them quickly because it explodes inside them. It's a very violent and a very efficient way of hunting down whales. And that's why really the height of whaling was in the 60s and 70s, because they were taking so many whales at the time. So this is set in that period, and it's a taste that I have not had. It's actually, I think, sadder, because there's, at least in some of those older books like Moby Dick or books based off of Moby Dick, you had some hope that the whales were going to get away. They could destroy a whaling boat. They could stove in the whaling ship. They could kill the whalers. In the 60s and 70s, they couldn't. These are steel ships. They're not going to break them with their heads. They're going to kill themselves if they run into them. These ships are very fast. They can go for days in these hunts. And it's not that they're going to get hit with a harpoon, the line's going to break and they can get away. They're going to get hit with a harpoon and they're going to explode on the inside. There's horrible, just horrible. I like the book. It reminded me of those nature videos where there was a narrator with an English voice who kind of said, "Oh, the bear, blah 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 blah. The tiny cub will, if he doesn't get food by winter, he will be in danger." And that's what the narrative style in this book felt like. So I liked it. It was a really fact-packed book. You weren't totally invested in the characters, but you were invested in the story and the outcome. The tragedy with some of the whales and some of the successes with the family of the little calf. So it was a very different feel, but I really enjoyed Victor's approach to it because he's informed. He's giving us what is known at the time, And he's also telling us what's not known, just because of the limitations in science and man at the time. So many of these whaling books are indictments on the human race, where if we could just get along with other species and not drive them to extinction, that would be so much better, not only for those species, but also for us. It had that same feel to it, but it was a different approach, different time span. The Year of the Whale by Victor Sheffer. Check it out if you like whales. I'm sorry, the other thing that I thought was interesting is the blurb on the back. There's two blurbs on the back. One is from Dr. Remington Kellogg from the Smithsonian Institution. That's not a big surprise. But the other one's from Justice William O. Douglas, the U.S. Supreme Court. He was also chairman of the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. Not the person I was expecting to see blurbing the back of this thing. So it was I didn't know that when I bought it. I only realized that when I started to pick it up to read it. But it was a pretty interesting blurb coming from a very high up, important source, but not one you would typically associate with whaling. That's it. Thanks a lot. Have a good week. I forgot to mention this while I was recording, but the sounds that you heard at the beginning and end of this video are sperm whale clicks. They're codas and different clicks that they use to echolocate and communicate. They're kind of random. I know they kind of sound mechanical, but they are actually created by one of nature's best sonars.